So I'm getting asked by multiple people over on the gram to explain my thoughts on why the ceasefire is happening now. In a nutshell, I agree with Ori Goldberg, this political commentator quoted in Al Jazeera, as saying it's because Israel is imploding internally. And if you haven't been following that strand of news, it's really not promoted in the West at all. I'm going to read you a little bit from one of the chapters of my book about just how devastating this genocide has been to Israel. In the wake of Operation Al-Aqsa flood, more people worldwide have rallied to Palestine's cause than ever before. Israel's retaliatory genocide and the accompanying gleeful, sadistic content that countless Israelis have posted to social media over the past year have laid bare the fundamentally racist nature of Zionism. Even among Israel's formerly most stalwart allies, U.S. Jews, a sea change is occurring. Incredibly, a recent survey found fully a third of teenage U.S. Jews now sympathize with Hamas. Meanwhile, op-eds claim that Israeli society is unraveling. And while I don't know the metrics for society's unraveling, recently a massive demonstration of over 750,000 people shut down Tel Aviv to protest Netanyahu's government. The war has cost Israel around $66 billion. This is all at the time of writing. Its global credit rating has been downgraded, and numerous northern settlements have been abandoned, along with the port of Eilat. New construction has ground to a halt because Israel relied on Palestinians for their hard manual labor. The Jerusalem Post in October 2024 exposed just how vulnerable the Israeli economy is, with less than 100,000 highly educated people in tech and medicine propping up the entire economy. These are the types of settlers who tend to possess dual citizenship with other countries, and according to the head of the Shoresh Institute for Socioeconomic Research, many of those people are giving up and leaving. Their departure could cause Israel's economy to collapse. The Israeli military, meanwhile, is running out of bombs. At the time of writing, Israel is fighting ground wars in Gaza, the West Bank, and Lebanon. So this was a month ago that I, finalized the book, and they were still fighting in Lebanon. Airstriking targets, they're still in Lebanon, but a pin in that. Airstriking targets in Syria and Yemen to boot, and being targeted by embargoes from principled anti-genocidal countries around the world. As a result, the IOF has begun rationing armaments, a development Haaretz credits for an increase in Israeli casualties. It turns out the genocide, as the Nazis learned, is extremely costly and difficult to pull off. I want to return to one statistic I mentioned earlier, that the Israeli forces have dropped more explosives on this tiny, densely packed area of the Gaza Strip than the entire amount of explosives used in World War II. They've bombed Gaza as much as they possibly can. And yes, they have likely killed hundreds of thousands of people through this violence and brutality of their siege. That's based on the estimate in The Lancet. But there are still surely more than 1 million people in Gaza who've survived that unbelievable historic bombardment. The IOF is trying its damnedest to exterminate Palestinians, but it's failing because Palestinians in Gaza are proving more resilient, resourceful, organized, and unified than they could imagine. And, at least in part, because for the past year, Hamas has continued fighting Israel's ground invasion of the Gaza Strip through urban combat. It is hard to do a genocide, and if the leaders of Israel don't quit trying, they seem likely to destroy themselves in the attempt, as Nazi Germany did. Even Israeli soldiers are figuring out this war is futile. Their military is facing a crisis of defections. More and more soldiers are refusing to return to their deployments. In October of 2024, just after the 1-year anniversary of the war, Israeli Hebrew media outlet Hamakom described the collapse of Israeli morale, publishing interviews with soldiers who kept being deployed to the same neighborhoods in Gaza they had previously cleared. "We are like ducks at the shooting range," one IOF soldier said. "We don't understand what we're doing here." Israel's loss of stature in the eyes of the world has had major consequences beyond its borders. In the U.S., the Democratic Party's association with the genocide likely depressed turnout and contributed to its historic losses in the 2024 election. An insert that there just was a study coming out today showing that fully 29% of people who voted for Biden in 2020 but didn't now sat out the election because of Kamala Harris's stance on Gaza. That was the largest single reason people sat out this election. Wish I could add that in, but the book has gone to press. Meanwhile, back to the book. A global movement of college students engaged in civil disobedience face brutalization and arrest at the hands of police, finding themselves at odds with the administrators of their own universities. With striking uniformity across the Western world, the ruling class has responded to nonviolent, anti-genocide protests for Palestine with disproportionate police violence. Such brutality can be a radicalizing experience for young people, just look at what became of those kids who marched peacefully in Gaza in 2018. And that's, I'm referring to earlier when I talked about the March of Return, which was a non-violent protest movement within Gaza in 2018 to protest Israeli occupation. And I talk about how Hamas, it was a spontaneous protest at first, but Hamas eventually assumed leadership of the March of Return. And it was actually Yahya Sinwar who made speeches urging people to keep those marches nonviolent, even as Israel was shooting live ammunition into these peaceful marchers as they were approaching the occupation wall every single Friday. So yeah, why is Israel doing the ceasefire now? They literally cannot sustain this genocide. They are falling apart. So I see some people in the comments saying, "Ooh, what is Israel's real plan? Like, what are they going to do now?" Like, you're assuming Israel's like playing 4D chess on this, and whatever comes next that the West does is going to be even worse. That's not my analysis. My analysis is that they are severely weakened and they have to stop. And if this is the first you're hearing from me or hearing about this book and you're curious to learn more, my name's Sim Kern. I'm an anti-Zionist Jewish author, and I was commissioned to write this book, Genocide Bad, by Interlink Press, which is the only Palestinian-owned publisher in the United States. And it's coming out in March, and you can find pre-order links, where you find them. So in a nutshell, though, why ceasefire now? Because if Israel doesn't ceasefire, they're going to literally implode, which means everything we've been doing is working, and keep it up.